Let's look at one of the most well-marked and distinctive plant families, the Brassicaceae. And, well, there was an old name for the Brassicaceae. There's a few plant families, 8 of them, I think, that not only do they have the names that end in ACEAE and that are named after a prominent genus, such as Brassica. We're all kind of familiar with Brassica. They have alternative names, and the alternative name for the Brassicaceae was the cruciferae. It means cross-bearing, and because it looks like a little crucifix. And this family varies from the primitive-ish characteristics of those so-called finch flowers by having a reduction in the number of parts. 4 sepals, 4 petals, and only 6 stamens, and you've seen Carpus gynoecium with just 2 carpels. They nothing can be arranged spirally with that sort of configuration. But there's not a lot of other modifications. We don't see fusion of parts much, and we don't see any weird symmetry. The mustard family. Mustard family is, surprise, the family that mustard is in, and a lot of other kind of vegetables too. For example, this is broccoli that we had in our garden and let grow a little bit too much. When you eat broccoli, you're eating flower buds, and if you let it grow, they flower. They turn into these blossoms. Very typical members of the mustard family. Here's a close-up of the flowers of that broccoli, showing the 6 stamens. 4 of them are long and 2 of them are short, showing the 4 sepals, or at least you can see that there's one of them poking in there, and the 4 petals that are equal in size and shape and that are separate from each other. They have a shape that's sort of divided into a broad expanded limb and a narrow pointed claw. There was this, maybe there still is, this spice company called McCormick that I love their packaging. They have these really anatomically correct labels that show what the plants actually look like. And this mustard shows the features of the mustard family. It shows the flowers very nicely. And mustard is the ground seeds of a member of the genus Brassica, Brassica nigra. This, in fact, is Brassica nigra, growing as a weed along roadsides, as it does. The leaves in the mustard family are usually simple, not always, alternate, though. And they have, their inflorescence is what's called a raceme. It's an elongate inflorescence with stalked flowers, the older ones at the bottom and the younger ones at the top. Radishes. Radishes are members of the mustard family, and if you let a radish grow too big, boom, you get this big flowering thing with these obvious mustard blooms on it. That's the kid. The kid's 30 now and has a degree from our department, EEOB. This is a lovely native wildflower called cutleaf toothwort, Cardamine concatenata. And this has compound leaves, which are sort of toothy. It's a spring wildflower. It's very abundant in April. And you can see the typical mustard family features. 4 sepals, 4 petals, 6 stamens, 4 long and 2 short. Here's the fruit of the toothwort. And as mentioned when we learned about fruits, the mustard family has a sort of a modified capsule. It's got some weird anatomical peculiarity that makes it have a special name. It's called a silique, Silique, and that's the name for if it's long and narrow like this, when it's sleek. Here's another type of cardamine. It's spring cress, Cardamine bulbosa. It has white flowers, and it might just be sort of hanging on, still flowering a little bit in some wet spots. It's a spring flowering plant, but not as early as some other ones of these cardamines. This is a introduced plant, but it's not super weedy. It's called watercress, and it grows in streams. Nasturtium, even though it's not really what we usually think of when we think of nasturtium. And it's edible. The mustard family includes a lot of edible members, including, as mentioned, the ones we mentioned, and also turnip and cabbage and kale, horseradish. There are a lot of members of the mustard family that are actually cultivars of the same species. None of the members of the mustard family are poisonous, Some of them might be so acrid and hot tasting that you wouldn't enjoy eating them, but you wouldn't be in danger if you ate any member of the mustard family, like you might for some other families, especially, for example, the parsley family. Eek, be careful with them. This is a lovely native wildflower. It's a great rarity. It's one of these plants that grows along beaches, and it's most at home on the Atlantic coast, well, also the Pacific coast. It occurs on ocean beaches, on many coasts, and it occurs along the Great Lakes, where it doesn't know. It's not along an ocean. Not very common in the Great Lakes because our beach communities are kind of disturbed by a lot of recreation, but there's a few lovely communities of natural areas, including, for example, where this picture was taken, at Mentor Headland Dunes State Nature Preserve in Lake County in northeast Ohio. Lovely natural area. This is called sea rocket, and sea rocket is a little bit different than most mustards. It's got a juicy, succulent foliage and stems, adaptation for the extreme dry conditions it sometimes finds in the sand, and the fruits, which are short and squat. So this would be called a silicle, which is the name for the short, squat mustard fruit. These are kind of actually sort of swollen and especially adapted for dispersal by water. It's definitely a beach plant with a lot of adaptations for life on the beach. This is a plant that's flowering now. I speak to you on third week, would be the fourth week in May, and this plant's very prominent along roadsides. It's called Dame's Rocket. And actually, a lot of people mistake Dame's Rocket for phlox, which is very similar in aspect, but has 5 petals, not 4. So this is clearly a member of the mustard family once you look closely. And you can see the silicles, the fruits, these long, narrow fruits that are beginning to mature. This is sort of in the late stage of flowering, with the last flowers flowering in this inflorescence that is older at the bottom and younger at the top. Dame's Rocket. This is a lovely little, it's not native, it's alien, but it's not a noxious weed either. It's called whitlow grass, but of course it's not a grass. And it's used to be called Draba verna, but now it's called Areophila verna. And it looks like it has 8 petals, but each one of these petals is very deeply lobed, but they're definitely 4. It has all the mustard characteristics. The fruit is a silicle. An interesting thing about whitlow grass is its lifespan. It's a winter annual. Annuals are plants that live 1 year, and they generally persist through some sort of dormant, stressful season as a seed. Winter annuals, they spend the winter as a little rosette of leaves. So this plant overwinters, as I just mentioned, as a little rosette of leaves, and then when early spring comes, it bolts. It sends up a flowering cluster. It rapidly sets fruit, and then the fruits open to disperse the seeds, and they sort of suffer through the droughtiest part of the summer as seeds. That's their stressful period, summer, when it's dry. And then they sprout in the fall, and they manage to grow when it's warm enough at intervals during the winter. It's a winter annual. It overwinters as a rosette of leaves and only lives 1 year. It's an interesting lifespan that not very many plants have. Whitlow grass, Draba, or Areophila verna. Okay, as we have been done with all of our prominent plant families, even though there are a lot of lovely native wildflowers, there are some weeds that we don't like. And this is one of the worst woodland weeds. It's called garlic mustard. I put a little dash between the garlic and the mustard because garlic is a member of the old-time lily family, something slightly different now, and not a brassica, but mustard's definitely apt. And it's got these heart-shaped leaves. It's a biennial. First year it makes a rosette, and the second year it bolts and flowers and fruits and then dies. And we wish it would die before that, because it's very abundant in some woodlands. A lot of management efforts go to pulling up garlic mustard, Alliaria petiolata. This is a weed that's not especially noxious in my opinion, but maybe it's because I'm not a farmer or something. I think it is actually a problem in some types of situations, but it's I find it be engaging nonetheless. It's called, because of what it's called. It's called shepherd's purse. And the scientific name is Capsella bursipastoris, which translates to shepherd's purse. And the fruit, as you can see, is a silicle. You can see the little division that divides it into two sections. And it's quaint because it looks like a little purse that a little shepherd might carry. So that's what we've learned about the Brassicaceae. And I'm especially charmed by Roger Tory Peterson's little iconography there. You see very plainly the four-parted symmetry that suggests the name cruciferae and a silique, a very distinctive fruit of the Brassicaceae, the mustard family.